There's a really interesting browser bug that came out with CSS3, and I'm really excited to talk about it.
So Matt, I hear you have a story about a CSS side channel attack.
Yeah, this is really interesting, and it gets a little bit down in the weeds, so bear with me. But I thought it was a really fascinating attack. So the way that browsers are built today, they sort of enforce separation between content from one site and another site. That's called the same origin policy, and that's key to understanding the story. So what you can do is you can put an iframe around, so you can put a site within a site, but you're not allowed to really access the memory. But with CSS, which is sort of like a style sheets, it's a way of styling the way the content appears on the site, you can put a layer of something on top of something else and sort of blend them together so the colors are blended. And it turns out that you can use this as an interesting side channel attack to figure out what's within that frame. A side channel attack is a way of getting information out of a system by non-standard means that aren't really a function of the system, but sort of a side effect of the way that normal operation occurs. So the attack goes a little bit like something like this. You get a whole bunch of layers, like 1,000 of them. You stack them together on top of what you're trying to read out of, and you use these blend modes. And it takes some time. You're basically doing an operation so that the colors of all these somehow add up mathematically to the final product. But that takes some time. And depending on what's on the bottom, it takes a different amount of time. So as you do this over and over and over, and you keep moving your stack of layers, you take a note of how long it takes, and based on the time differences, you can infer what's in that section. So it's kind of like scanning across the region that you're not allowed to read to sort of infer what's inside of it.
So I did go through the story. A couple of things are interesting. One is just really the power that you have on the client side now. There are things you can do in CSS that, traditionally, more power was on the server side. So there's so many more opportunities now for these types of side channel attacks. Another thing that's interesting is, the sites should really start looking more at these X-fairing options in the HTTP headers. So really restricting, what other sites can load and not load of your content.
The web developers themselves need to realize that this is a possibility and potentially be a little bit more careful about how their frames are used by other websites. So Matt, was there any examples of exploits that actually occurred, or is this just a theoretical thing that someone found, or are there any examples out in the wild that we saw?
So there's no examples of anybody using this for criminal purposes out in the wild. The authors, they developed a couple of proof of concepts of it. So if you go to the write-up for this, they'll show you that if you were to go and log into Facebook in one tab and then go to their site in the browser, it would be able to read out things like the portion where they expect to see your name. It would read out your name visibly using this technique. So over time, it would be able to do that.
I don't think that there were any known exploits, but there was a big concern that someone could use this to read your information, whether it be on a regular website or something like Facebook.
An interesting thing to note is that somebody had discovered this back in March of 2017 as well. Somebody else had reported it, and I guess it got stuck in the process over at Google to try and get the bug fixed. And then 2 other researchers independently found the same exact bug. So I think there's a lot of interest in this area. The more features you add to a web browser, which is already a very complicated piece of software, the more features you add to it, the more attack surface you're probably going to expose. I mean, it's crazy the sorts of things that they're putting into web browsers today. There was a standard for web Bluetooth where a website could use Bluetooth to reach out to the devices sitting around the laptop. So as long as someone can go to a website or force you to go to a website, convince you to get there, it could sort of map what devices are near you. I mean, that stuff I think is a bit much. Maybe it's because I spend a lot of time on the command line, but I don't need a browser with a whole lot of features. I don't think I need anything else crammed into the browser. But somebody thought it was a good idea. Yeah. So for users, basically patch, because this has already been fixed in all of the browsers that were affected by it. If you're a developer, understanding the environment in which your site's content may also be loaded is key to defending against these sort of general class of attacks.